There's some major changes coming from Canada, like caps on international student, post-study work permit, and financial requirements being increased. Those are not the only three changes. There are other changes as well. So today I'm going to discuss in detail all the major changes which are being announced in Canada. Again, I'm not doing this video on my own. I have a special guest who's going to do the talking, and she is Shafoli. But before inviting her, let me introduce myself. My name is Sarica, and welcome to Your Knowledge Buddy. If you want to study your master's, bachelor's, or even PhD in any of this listed country, my team can help you free of cost. You have to simply fill the form which is provided in my video description and pin comment, and my team will reach out to you.
Are you tired of hearing that there are no jobs in the UK? I've got exciting news for you. Just today, I spotted 168,772 jobs and vacancies advertised on read.co.uk alone. And guess what? There are even more opportunities on other platforms. If you're struggling to kickstart your UK job journey, join me in my UK Masterclass on 20th of July, 12 noon UK time. In this session, I'll cover everything you need to know, like different visa categories for settling down in the UK, which most of the people don't know. Number 2, a curated list of jobs that require lower salaries for visa sponsorship. Number 3, high demand career paths. Number 4, secret job sites for visa sponsorship. Number 5, mind-blowing AI tool to customize your cover letter and CV. And number 6, and the last one, interview preparation tips. Simply comment webinar and I'll send you a direct link to your DM. See you soon.
So without any further delay, let me introduce you guys to Shafoli. Hi Shafoli, welcome again to Your Knowledge Buddy. And if you don't mind, can you please introduce yourself once again to my audience, please?
Thank you again, Sarica, for having me. My name is Shafoli Kapoor, and I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. If you ever need any help with Canadian immigration, I am the person to go to.
And all the details about Shafoli will be in my comment section in my video description as well. Please go and reach out to Shafoli. Okay, so today's topic is to talk about the major changes which has been announced in Canada. When I invited you 2 weeks back, we talked about the caregiver visa. And then after that as well, I hear plenty of other things which are happening in Canada. So do you think you'll be able to give like a summary of all the major changes which are happening in Canada now?
Yes, Sarica, I think I can quickly go over some of the big changes that we've seen this year in Canadian immigration that has hugely impacted, the number of people who can now come to Canada and then also be able to live their Canadian dream. I think the biggest news of the year for Canada was the cap on international students. We all know that Canada has been a popular choice and number one choice, I think, for people across the globe to come to, especially India, to be honest, to come to Canada, get their post-secondary education or postgraduate education, and then ultimately be able to permanently settle in Canada. It has been like that because that is how the government of Canada has promoted their immigration policies. There were programs available for international students to ultimately settle in Canada, and that is why there was such a huge demand, for students to come to Canada. But things have changed. Canada has suddenly realized that there are too many people in Canada and they don't need any more international students. So the biggest change that we heard this year in January of 2024 was a cap on number of international students who will be allowed to come to Canada. IRCC expects only to accept 360,000 study permits this year, which will reduce the number of people who will come. We had almost 2 million students who came in the last 2 years. So they're bringing those numbers down significantly.
Did you say that this change is already started from Jan this year, or will it start next Jan?
No, they're already in place. In January, the caps were announced, and there was another thing that was introduced, which we never had before, known as provincial attestation letters. Every applicant or international student who wishes to study in Canada and who wants to apply for a study permit needs to get a provincial attestation letter by the province that they will be coming to study at or study in. And based on that provincial attestation letter, they can submit their study permit application, of course, with all the other documentation that was always required in like the financial documents, the language scores, their past experience, education, and all of that. So that's number 2 change, provincial attestation letters. The third big change that we saw was the increase in the requirement of proof of funds. So usually what we used to see that when students applied for their study visas, they had to show that they had $10,000 available to them to support their living costs in Canada. But the living costs in Canada have increased drastically. So keeping that in mind, the government of Canada increased the funds requirement for international students from $10,000 to $20,000. So now whoever is coming to Canada to study and are making their study permit application, they need to show that they have $20,000 available to them to support themselves in the first year of living in Canada. And this does not include the ticket price, the tuition fee, and all of that. This is just living costs in Canada to pay for your boarding and lodging and food and basic living. That's the third big change. The fourth big change that we had was the spouses of international students who are coming here to study in diploma programs or certificate programs are no longer eligible for open work permits. This was not the case for as long as I remember, but they changed that. And the reason is they don't want to bring too many temporary residents in Canada, because we have way too many temporary residents living in Canada right now who don't have any pathway for permanent residence. So in order to reduce the number of temporary residents, they introduced this policy where only spouses of master's students, postdoctoral students, so PhD students, and then a few bachelor degree programs like bachelors of nursing and bachelors of science, those kind of programs. I think there's 7 or 8 programs that are included. Their spouses will be allowed to come on work permits. For certificate programs and diploma holders, there are no chances.
Can I just add one thing? Because I'm comparing Canada with UK. I still see Canada is better because in UK, if you are doing your bachelor's, you cannot bring your dependent. If you're doing a master's, you cannot bring your dependent unless until you're doing a research-based course. And there are not too many research-based courses for masters. The only option people have now, if they want to bring their dependent, is PhD, which is of course 3 years or 4 years program, and it's of course going to cost a lot of money as well.
Then another change that we had was the postgraduate work permit for master's students. Usually what happens is that a postgraduate work permit, the validity is dependent on the duration of the program that you do. If you do a 1-year program in Canada, you get a 1-year work permit. If you do a 16-month program, you get a 16-month work permit. If you do a 2-year program, then you get, or 1+1, like 2 1-year programs, then you get a 3-year work permit. So some of the master's programs in Canada were for 1-year duration. So what the government introduced is that if you're doing a master's degree, then even if you're doing a 1-year program, you will still get a 3-year work permit. So that's a big one. A lot of master's students sometimes struggle because they do a 1-year program because they don't want to, because master's is expensive, right? So they do 1-year program, but then the 1-year work permit was not usually enough for them to ultimately transition themselves into permanent residence. With the 3-year work permit, their chances for increase to transition. That's number 4th, I think.
I have a question to ask. So this is for masters. Any changes to bachelor's as well?
No, because bachelor's as it is a 4-year program, right? A 4 or a 5-year program, depending on what bachelor's you do. So you as it is get a 3-year permit. Doesn't matter.
What about PhD students? How much?
Yeah, they still get a 3-year work permit, right? Because PhD is also usually like keeping the research work and your thesis and everything in mind, depending when you start it. And some PhDs are 2 years, some are 3 years, some are longer. So depending on that, but still you're eligible for because the PhD usually is never for 1 year, right?
Yeah.
It's becoming harder from provincial nominee programs as well. I'm not going to go too much into detail about that because that's not the topic of today. But we hear every other day there's some other updates that we get from provincial nominations, like the programs, the provinces. For example, Alberta recently introduced that they're only going to accept applications for PNP programs once a month. So they've done it on first come, first serve basis. And it's once a month, just because they want to maintain their inventory levels. Similarly, Nova Scotia suddenly in May decided that they're not going to accept applications from food service sector. So there are changes that are coming. Literally, we get to hear something or the other every other day or every week. But again, that's, I think, more specific to people who are already here. Not sure if your audience would be interested in it, but if they are, we can always do another session where we can just talk about PNP programs. There is also speculation. There's words like it's going around that they might introduce restrictions on postgraduate work permits as well. When I say they might introduce restrictions, is that the government is in talks with their other stakeholders and counterparts, provincial counterparts and universities and colleges, to see if they can limit the PGWP to only those international students who are studying in high demand occupations. So right now, anybody who comes to a public program in Canada, even if it is like a community college, they are eligible for a postgraduate work permit. They don't necessarily have to go to a university to obtain a postgraduate work permit. As a result, again, so many temporary residents in Canada because everybody can get a postgraduate work permit. They are going to limit granting those work permits only to people who are studying in high demand occupations like, trades programs or STEM programs or healthcare programs. Again, this is not announced yet. It's speculated that this change is coming very, very soon. Another big change we had was for people in here, what happens is that there are community colleges, there are public colleges, and then they do tie-ups with some private schools in other cities or provinces so that students can come to study. Those are called public-private agreement colleges. The government has said that if you're coming to study at that public college, then you're still eligible for a postgraduate work permit as of today. But if you're studying at one of those private public agreement colleges, then you're not going to get a postgraduate work permit. So that was also, this is already implemented. So from May 15th, anybody who's studying at a public private agreement college will not get a postgraduate work permit. But if they're coming at a proper public college, then yes, they're eligible for a postgraduate work permit as of right now. Again, what will happen in the future, nobody knows. But as of right now, they can get. So those are really the big changes that I can think of that we can talk of right now. Another thing, postgraduate work permits, usually what people could do back, again, not specifically for your audience because they're outside Canada, but it is for people, in case you have audience who's here. If you're a student here and you want to apply for your postgraduate work permit, usually people apply online. But sometimes, we had students who would go to the border, US-Canada border, to apply for a postgraduate work permit so that they can get it quickly. Because if you apply at the port of entry, you can get it quickly, like the same day. So the government stopped that as well. International students cannot go to the border to obtain their postgraduate work permits anymore.
Oh, so you covered around 7 to 8 updates, I believe, right?
And I'm sure I'm forgetting some. And we're on a time constraint, but I'm sure we have some more. But these are the big ones that I think your audience would be interested in because they're outside Canada and they're probably still planning on what they want to do, whether they want to come to Canada or not. So yeah, it's important for them to know.
So guys, if you're watching this video, if you think Shafoli already covered the major update, if you think there's something missing, you can comment us. And if you got any questions or queries, or if you need any help from Shafoli, all the details will be there. But keep commenting so that we know and understand what are the burning questions from you guys. And if there are more requests, I'm going to bring Shafoli regularly on my channel. We can also do a live session. We are in a different time zone, so we will have to see how we can do that. But definitely there's a possibility, which I'm happy to do it. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your knowledge, Shafoli. Once again, thank you very much and all the best to you.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me on your channel. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.